welcome back. Or if this is your first time here, thank you for joining us in this quiet moment with history. Tonight, we'll set aside the bright lights of modern medicine and return to a time when disease was a mystery and hope was whispered into the wind. Before doctors and medicine, plagues weren't just frightening, they were tests of faith. The Egyptians, Greeks and Romans believed illness was a punishment from the gods. Instead of antibiotics, they turned to herbs, charms and long nightly prayers. In the Middle Ages, the Black Death swept through Europe like a nightmare. People wore bird-beak masks stuffed with herbs to ward off bad air and begged God for mercy. Quarantines began, crude, but a starting point. By the 17th and 18th centuries, people began to think differently. Venice enforced 40-day quarantines, field hospitals were built, and strange early protective gear appeared. Odd-looking, but hopeful. Before we understood bacteria or viruses, people relied on belief and folk remedies. Treatment might involve herbs, cupping, bloodletting, or burning incense. It wasn't always effective, sometimes even harmful. But from those uncertain steps, the roots of modern medicine quietly began to grow. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past, stay by the warm fire with us here at Sleeping History. Shall we begin? In ancient times, considered the foundational era of human medicine, people still lived in primitive societies without the tools of modern science to explain mysterious phenomena like epidemics. In great civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, disease was understood through a variety of lenses, a blend of religious belief, natural philosophy, and hands-on experience. Alongside these understandings, elaborate rituals and sacrifices were performed in hopes of appeasing divine beings who were often seen as the root cause of illness. One of the most widespread beliefs of the ancient world was that disease was not caused by bacteria or viruses, but rather as punishment from the gods. In ancient Egypt, where religious faith permeated every aspect of life, illness was viewed as a sign of divine wrath. Gods like Seth and Sekhmet, both associated with destructive power, were believed to unleash plagues when humans transgressed. Disease, in this worldview, served as a warning, a punishment, or even a method of purifying society. Similarly, in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians believed that illness stemmed from the anger of gods, or from supernatural forces like demons and evil spirits. Humans were thought to be pawns in the cosmic struggles between divine entities, and disease was a way for the gods to assert their power. Hence, ritual prayers and sacrificial offerings were not merely spiritual practices, they were essential forms of healing, aimed at pacifying higher powers. In Greece and Rome, disease began to be explained through early naturalistic theories. The Greek philosopher and physician Hippocrates, widely regarded as the father of Western medicine, introduced the concept of the four humours: blood, sanguine, phlegm, yellow bile, choler, and black bile, melancholy. According to him, good health resulted from a balanced harmony among these fluids, while illness arose when that balance was disturbed. The Greeks also believed in a form of natural balance similar to the Eastern concept of yin and yang. Although distinct in its details, it shared the central idea that health depended on harmony between elements. Disease was thought to result from imbalances in natural conditions such as temperature, humidity, and air quality. The human body was seen as a delicate system that required equilibrium, and when environmental conditions became unfavourable, epidemics would follow. Given the belief that disease was divine punishment, ancient societies developed complex ritual systems to plead for forgiveness and restore peace. In Egypt, temple ceremonies were conducted with great care and solemnity. Priests and prophets led sacrificial offerings to the gods, not only to heal individuals but to protect entire communities from the spread of contagion. These beliefs and practices, while steeped in mysticism and often devoid of scientific rationale, laid the psychological and cultural groundwork for humanity's later approaches to medicine. They also highlight how deeply intertwined health, faith, and society were in the earliest attempts to understand and survive illness. A typical example of ancient healing rituals was the sacrifice of animals to appease the gods. Cattle, sheep, or doves, carefully chosen for their symbolic purity and spiritual significance, were offered in solemn ceremonies. These rituals could last for days, accompanied by chants and prayers repeated tirelessly in hopes of gaining divine mercy. In Mesopotamia and the ancient Middle East, similar rites were practiced. people believed that calming the gods would help dispel disaster and restore health. In some cases, prophets were invited to deliver divine messages and provide specific instructions on how to deal with plagues. These figures were highly respected and believed to possess a direct connection to the supernatural. Greece, in particular, was known for its temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, where the sick would come to pray and undergo healing rituals. It was believed that Asclepius could grant health through dreams or miraculous interventions. This form of treatment blended spirituality with early forms of medicine, reflecting how ancient societies intertwined faith and science in their approach to illness. While religious belief played a central role in explaining and addressing disease, the ancients also developed treatment methods based on observation and practical experience. Natural herbs became a vital treasure trove for treating various ailments. In Egypt, herbs like angelica, lotus flowers, and aromatic oils were used for topical application, detoxification, and wound care. Egyptian physicians recorded their remedies on papyrus scrolls, forming one of humanity's earliest medical texts. In Mesopotamia, plant-based medicines were brewed into potions or pressed into tablets. Detox treatments using herbs were designed to neutralize poisons in the body. Healers employed techniques such as massage, herbal compresses, and ointments to help ease the suffering of patients. Acupuncture, originating from ancient Chinese medicine, also dates back more than 2,000 years. Based on the theory of meridians and energy flow, QI, it aimed to restore balance between yin and yang and enhance well-being by stimulating specific points on the body. In Greece and Rome, physicians often used salves made from ingredients like honey, tree resin, and medicinal herbs to disinfect and heal wounds. Bloodletting was a common procedure meant to reduce the excess of one of the 4 bodily humours, in keeping with prevailing medical theories of the time. Looking back, it becomes clear that in an age of limited scientific knowledge, humans placed their trust in invisible forces to explain and combat disease. Many epidemics that claimed countless lives in the past could likely have been controlled or even prevented today with modern medicine. Yet, perhaps this is part of nature's rhythm, a cyclical force that shapes life through challenge and adaptation. What do you think? Could this be nature's way of keeping balance, or simply the cost of progress on our journey through history? After passing through the ancient period, when humanity laid the rudimentary foundations of medicine, we enter the Middle Ages, a time of dramatic upheaval in which disease posed not only a threat to health, but also a profound challenge to social, religious, and cultural structures. Building upon earlier conceptions, the medieval worldview of disease blended deep religious belief, limited understanding of biology, and complex social responses, particularly across regions such as Europe, China, India, and the Islamic world. The Middle Ages witnessed the emergence of several devastating epidemics, the most infamous being the Black Death in 14th century Europe. This pandemic ranks among the greatest catastrophes in human history, wiping out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population in just a few short years. Modern science identifies the cause of the Black Death as the bacterium Yersinia pestis, spread by fleas and rats. However, people at the time had no concept of germs or biological contagion. All they could perceive was the disease's terrifying speed and scale, leading to panic, fear, and speculation steeped in superstition and religious interpretation. In China, large-scale outbreaks similarly caused massive population losses and societal disruption. India and the Islamic world also suffered deeply, with epidemics triggering economic collapse and spiritual crises, plunging many communities into chaos and instability. A continuation and amplification of ancient thinking was the unwavering belief in divine power as the only path to salvation. Disease was seen as direct punishment from God, or the gods, for human sin and moral decay. This belief led to tragic social consequences. In Europe, many people believed that the plague was God's retribution for sin, often blaming scapegoated groups such as Jews, whom they accused of poisoning wells or plotting against Christian communities. These baseless accusations sparked horrific riots and massacres. At the same time, suspected witches, especially women, were hunted down and executed in a frenzy of fear and desperation. Religious fervour also drove individuals to blame themselves, giving rise to movements of self-flagellation, pilgrimage, and self-imposed penance, all in hopes of forgiveness and divine mercy. Large crowds of penitents roamed from town to town seeking redemption, but often unwittingly spreading disease further due to the mass gatherings. In terms of medical treatment, medieval medicine remained heavily influenced by ancient beliefs, interwoven with superstition and a fundamental misunderstanding of disease. One of the most common practices was bloodletting, the removal of blood to balance the body's humours, based on Hippocratic theory. Though now known to be harmful, it was widely practiced by medieval physicians. Herbs continued to play an essential role in treatment. People applied herbal poultices to wounds, drank decoctions made from local plants, and relied on medicinal wines to enhance healing. However, most of these remedies were passed down orally or based on personal experience, lacking any consistent scientific foundation. Burning incense and performing exorcisms were also common methods to expel bad air, or malevolent spirits believed to cause illness. The thick incense smoke and ritualistic chants provided a sense of spiritual comfort amid widespread fear and suffering. Another important measure was the quarantining of affected areas, a rudimentary but vital step in slowing the spread of infection. Entire villages or cities were locked down, with residents restricted from travelling and often left to survive under harsh and isolating conditions. Though limited in effectiveness and socially devastating, quarantine marked the beginning of disease containment strategies. Beyond Europe, other civilizations also developed their own approaches to epidemic control. In China, traditional medicine evolved with theories of yin-yang and the five elements. Treatments included acupuncture, herbal medicine, and energy balancing practices rooted in thousands of years of cultural knowledge. In India, Ayurveda emphasized harmony between body and spirit, using herbs, diet, and meditation for holistic healing. The Islamic world, with academic hubs like Baghdad, built its medical knowledge on a synthesis of ancient Greek philosophy and local science. Pioneering physicians like Avicenna laid the groundwork for modern medical thought, with comprehensive texts that systematized diagnosis, treatment, and pharmacology. Despite their differences in method and faith, all these civilizations shared the same existential challenges: confusion in the face of unseen enemies, a collective appeal to divine powers, and the enduring human effort to understand and heal through a blend of belief, experience, and trial. After the turbulent centuries of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance and early modern periods marked a critical turning point in the history of medicine. It was during this time that humanity began to observe and study epidemics in a more systematic and rational way, opening up new paths for prevention and treatment. Although most medical practices were still based on experience and traditional medicine, notable advancements in disease management and the establishment of medical institutions laid the groundwork for modern healthcare. Beyond Europe, Japan also experienced significant medical developments during this era, particularly through the blending of indigenous traditional practices and external influences. The Renaissance is often regarded as a revival of knowledge and science, following centuries constrained by superstition and religious dogma. Scholars and physicians began taking the first steps toward documenting, analysing and understanding infectious diseases. They carefully observed symptoms, tracked the progression of outbreaks, and attempted to record information that could be used for treatment and prevention. One of the most significant milestones of the period was the emergence of medical literature based on serious study, including detailed descriptions of diseases such as smallpox, plague, and other contagious illnesses. Figures like Girolamo Fracastoro, from 1478 to 1553, proposed the concept of contagion, suggesting that diseases could be spread through direct contact or intermediaries. This was a major intellectual leap forward, laying essential groundwork long before the birth of bacteriology. In Japan, the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, saw the development of traditional medical texts that were carefully written and passed down through generations of physicians. Kampo medicine, rooted in traditional Chinese medical theory, flourished during this time with its own unique herbal remedies and therapeutic techniques. The Japanese also began to incorporate Western medical knowledge through diplomatic exchanges, setting the stage for a future synthesis between Eastern and Western approaches to medicine. One of the most practical and transformative advancements of this era was the more scientific and structured approach to quarantine as a means of controlling disease spread. In Europe, especially in major trading cities such as Venice, quarantine was formalized by law. Strict regulations required a 40-day isolation period, quarantagiorni in Italian, from which the word quarantine originates, for travellers or anyone suspected of carrying illness. This systematic public health policy became a powerful tool in reducing the impact of contagious outbreaks. These developments reflect a period of transition where faith and tradition still played a role, but observation, logic, and organised response began to take precedence. It was the beginning of a new medical mindset, one that looked not only to the heavens, but also to the world around us for answers. This wasn't just about confining the sick to isolated area. It also involved the setup of quarantine stations, where the health of people entering or leaving the city was monitored and assessed. Temporary field hospitals began to appear, built specifically to treat those struck by the epidemic. These makeshift facilities helped ease the burden on official hospitals and reduce the risk of cross-infection within the general population. Meanwhile, in Japan, public health management and epidemic prevention were also carried out through localized quarantine measures and lockdowns whenever outbreaks occurred. Although the scale and structure of these practices differed, the idea of concentrating the infected in separate facilities did help to slow the wildfire-like spread of disease to some extent. Despite growing awareness and increasingly structured approaches to epidemic control, treatments during the Renaissance and early modern periods still relied largely on traditional experience and classical medical practices. In Europe, physicians continued to employ time-honoured methods such as bloodletting, herbal remedies, special diets, and enforced rest, all aimed at restoring balance among the body's humours. Herbal concoctions, often prepared from wild plants and kitchen herbs, were used extensively. However, the effectiveness of such remedies was unpredictable at best, mainly because people still had no real understanding of what actually caused disease. In Japanese medicine, Kampo remained the cornerstone of treatment. This system revolved around complex herbal formulas designed to regulate internal energy and promote holistic wellness. Acupuncture and moxibustion, the burning of mugwort on specific points of the body, were also commonly practiced to stimulate circulation and harmonize bodily functions. Though none of these methods could directly eliminate the invisible agents of disease, they did improve overall health and gave patients a better shot at recovery, sometimes by healing the illness, and sometimes simply by making them feel a little less miserable, while they waited for nature, or fate, to take its course. Throughout human history, epidemics have remained an unrelenting nightmare, threatening both life and social order. Among the oldest and most effective methods for dealing with pandemics has been isolation and lockdown, strategies aimed at halting the spread of disease by limiting contact between the healthy and the infected. Much of what we now understand as modern quarantine protocols traces its roots back to the city of Venice, Italy, the birthplace of the concept of quarantine in the 14th century, from where it gradually spread across Europe and beyond. Venice, a bustling commercial hub of medieval Europe, played a vital role in connecting sea and land trade routes. However, its strategic location and heavy flow of merchants and travellers also made it particularly vulnerable to infectious diseases carried by ships and newcomers. In the wake of the devastating plague outbreaks of the 14th century, Venetian authorities swiftly recognised that protecting the city required keeping both people and goods from infected regions at a safe distance. They implemented strict regulations on quarantine, a practice that involved requiring all arrivals from plague-affected areas, both human and cargo, to remain in isolation for at least 40 days before being allowed entry into the city. The 40-day period was not chosen at random. It was based on the belief that this span of time was sufficient for any symptoms of illness to appear if someone, or something, was carrying the contagion. This duration also held deep cultural and religious significance. In many traditions, the number 40 symbolized purification and cleansing, a spiritual buffer zone between danger and safety. The designated quarantine sites, known as lazarettos, were established on islands near Venice, where immigrants or sailors were required to wait under strict conditions and undergo thorough inspections before being allowed to enter the mainland. These isolated locations were also used to quarantine suspected cases during later outbreaks. Controlling access to the city wasn't as simple as putting up a fence. It involved a complex system of coordination between local authorities, medical personnel and guards. Key trade entry points were equipped with quarantine stations, where health officials and sentries were tasked with inspecting, documenting, and monitoring the health of both people and goods. Despite the strictness of these protocols, they were not without challenges. Some travellers attempted to bypass quarantine regulations, merchants complained about the long delays in moving their goods, and there were even incidents where attempts to evade inspection caused serious complications. Meanwhile, the quarantine guards themselves faced immense hardships, from extreme weather conditions to resistance from the public and the ever-present risk of infection. They were, in many ways, the frontline defence against invisible enemies. Beyond border control, full-scale lockdowns of entire cities or districts became a widely used strategy during major outbreaks. Prominent cities like Florence, Milan, and London all experienced sweeping lockdowns, where citizens were confined to their homes and commercial and social activities came to a standstill. Lockdowns were, to a degree, effective in slowing the spread of disease, but they also brought heavy consequences in terms of economic and social hardship. People trapped in their homes often faced food shortages, limited access to medical care, and, in some cases, civil unrest. Nevertheless, lockdowns were considered a necessary measure, and governments did attempt to maintain social stability by organising support systems, distributing food, and providing basic healthcare where possible. What do you think? Are lockdowns and quarantines truly necessary when a pandemic strikes? Recently, we all lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, a time when the rapid spread of the virus left many countries reeling. In such circumstances, swift and decisive action by governments became the single most critical factor in controlling the outbreak and minimising the damage it caused. In humanity's long battle against epidemics, beyond quarantine and lockdowns, hygiene and environmental cleanliness have always played an indispensable role. Long before the discovery of germs, communities around the world developed traditional methods to eliminate or reduce disease-causing agents by cleaning their living spaces. While many of these methods may seem outdated by today's standards, they reflect the enduring human effort to protect public health. Before Robert Koch and Louis Pasteur discovered bacteria and their role in disease transmission in the 19th century, civilizations had no concept of microorganisms or how infectious diseases spread. Instead, people believed that epidemics stemmed from miasma, poisonous air, or supernatural forces. From these beliefs emerged symbolic and practical methods of cleansing living environments. Common practices such as burning incense, sprinkling lime powder, and cleaning streets were widely used to purify the surroundings, eliminate foul odours, and dispel toxic air. In many European cities, local authorities organised street cleaning campaigns, waste collection, and sewage maintenance to reduce environmental pollution. While not yet based on modern science, these efforts significantly helped reduce the risk of disease outbreaks. Burning incense, aromatic herbs, and medicinal plants indoors was a widespread method of repelling bad air and evil spirits according to traditional beliefs. People believed that fragrant smoke not only freshened the air, but also served as a spiritual barrier, purifying the home and protecting its inhabitants from disease and misfortune. Similarly, sprinkling lime powder, calcium oxide, on streets, courtyards, and public areas became a common measure to disinfect and neutralise organic pollutants. Lime has natural antiseptic properties, and although people at the time didn't fully understand how it worked, it proved effective in cleansing surfaces and preventing the growth of pathogens. Historical records show that during outbreaks of the plague, cities like London, Paris, and Venice issued strict mandates requiring the use of lime in public spaces and encouraging the burning of incense, as well as maintaining personal hygiene. One major contributor to the spread of disease was the filthy living environment, full of waste and untreated sewage. Thus, street cleaning, garbage collection, and improving drainage systems became essential measures. In medieval and early modern Europe, many cities began to develop a stronger awareness of urban sanitation. Street cleaning teams were formed to collect waste, dispose of garbage, and remove debris from narrow alleyways. Areas prone to stagnant water were filled in or drained to prevent mosquito breeding and reduce the spread of vector-borne diseases. Although modern sewage systems did not yet exist, these practical improvements played a role in reducing pollution and limiting the spread of infectious diseases within communities. To minimise transmission risks, authorities often ordered the temporary closure of public gathering places such as markets, temples, churches, and festivals. This was done to limit contact and prevent new outbreaks that could stem from large crowds. Closing markets, halting pilgrimages, or cancelling festivals were difficult decisions, as these events were not only vital for economic and cultural life but also served as spiritual anchors for the people. However, during times of serious epidemics, public safety was placed above all else. Many records show that major cities like London and Paris, as well as various regional communities, enacted such measures multiple times in history. Despite facing resistance and controversy, these interventions effectively curbed the spread of disease. Over the centuries, even with limited understanding of disease origins, people gradually realized through experience that cleanliness and sanitation were crucial factors in disease prevention. Efforts to organize street cleaning, isolate sources of contamination, and control communal living areas laid the groundwork for the development of public health. These hard-earned lessons became the foundation for modern environmental health policies and epidemic prevention strategies. After exploring how people once used quarantine, lockdowns, hygiene, and environmental sanitation to limit the spread of disease, we cannot overlook the deeply important role of faith and religious rituals, elements deeply woven into the spiritual life of communities, especially during times of rampant epidemics. Faith was more than just belief. It was a tool for healing, a source of strength that helped communities stay united and overcome fear and uncertainty in the face of invisible threats. Rituals such as collective prayer, pilgrimages, and religious processions became spiritual anchors and were integral to epidemic response strategies in earlier times. When an epidemic broke out, communities often organized mass prayer gatherings, drawing large groups of people to churches, temples, or sacred spaces. These were not merely religious acts, but moments of collective solidarity, where people shared pain, fear, and above all, hope. The belief that God, deities, or divine beings could heal and protect served as a powerful spiritual force that kept people from falling into despair. Collective prayer provided profound comfort, easing the loneliness, fear, and hopelessness experienced by the sick and their families. In medieval Europe, churches remained open for public gatherings and prayers for salvation. In East Asian countries like China and Japan, temples became centers for peace-invoking rituals, exorcisms, and ceremonies meant to drive away illness and restore harmony to the community. Pilgrimage was another widely practiced religious ritual across many cultures, and during epidemics, it took on even greater significance. The sick or their loved ones often embarked on long journeys to sacred places, believed to hold healing powers or to be under the favour of divine beings. Whether it was a journey to Rome, Jerusalem, India, or revered temples across Asia, pilgrimages were seen as a way to purify the soul, seek forgiveness, and call upon divine mercy during times of hardship. Spiritually, these journeys helped pilgrims feel connected to a higher power and a broader community of believers. However, pilgrimages also posed a double-edged sword. As thousands gathered and travelled in unsafe conditions, they unintentionally contributed to the faster spread of disease. This historical paradox provides a valuable lesson for today's approach to social distancing during pandemics. Religious processions were among the most vivid expressions of faith in ancient communities. In the face of epidemics, such processions were conducted as sacred rituals, pleading for forgiveness, health, and peace for entire villages, towns, or cities. These processions often passed through central streets, with religious leaders, locals in ceremonial attire, and symbolic items such as crosses, incense burners, or holy statues. The sounds of drums, bells, and sacred hymns filled the air, creating an atmosphere both solemn and filled with hope. Beyond their spiritual significance, processions also helped strengthen community bonds. In times of upheaval caused by disease, a shared spirit of unity, compassion, and empathy was powerfully awakened, helping people feel less alone in the struggle. In many parts of the world, such religious processions and festivals have been held for centuries, and many of their rituals continue today as living symbols of faith and spiritual resilience. Beyond prayer, pilgrimages, or processions, religious ceremonies and festivals were also seen as healing, both physically and spiritually. During major festivals, people would gather to sing, dance, and perform traditional rites meant to drive away illness and invite good fortune. These rituals often combined belief systems with music, dance, and symbolic acts, creating powerful interactions between the human and divine realms. Festivals became opportunities for people to recharge their spirits, renew faith, and draw on collective strength. However, as previously mentioned, large public gatherings also carried the risk of spreading disease, forcing authorities to weigh tradition against public safety, a dilemma still relevant today. Throughout history, religious belief and spiritual practice have not only helped people make sense of incomprehensible events, but also served as the most crucial source of emotional support during the darkest times. Such spiritual strength gave communities the will to persevere, maintain hope, and keep fighting. Before the advancement of medical science, faith acted as a remedy for the soul, helping humanity endure invisible dangers without falling apart. Religious faith and rituals did not exist in isolation. They were often deeply intertwined with sanitation, quarantine, and social control efforts. For instance, many festivals or rites were organised alongside closures of disease-stricken areas, blending healing with efforts to maintain order. In addition, many traditional prayers included guidelines for personal hygiene or called for temporary isolation, forming a multi-dimensional defence network against disease, even if it lacked scientific foundations by modern standards. In the long battle against epidemics, healers, physicians, and traditional medical systems played an indispensable role, a vital support for communities confronting peril. Although their scientific understanding was limited, practitioners of traditional medicine, from Eastern medicine and Ayurveda to ancient Western medicine, relied on accumulated experience and long-standing practices to protect and treat the sick. Since ancient times, healers and physicians were seen as people with special knowledge of the human body and healing techniques, though they differed in their levels of training and methods. They served as bridges between humans and the secrets of nature and the divine, while also being carriers of precious knowledge passed down through generations. In many cultures, physicians were formally trained and could document and study medical knowledge, such as doctors from the classical Western tradition, or medical scholars in India and China. Meanwhile, local healers were often those who learned their craft orally, had deep understanding of medicinal herbs, practiced folk remedies, and maintained close ties with their communities. Their role went beyond just treating illness. They also advised on prevention, hygiene practices, and offered emotional support to the sick and their families. Traditional Eastern medicine, with a history of more than 2,000 years, became a deeply influential medical system across many Asian countries. Its foundation rests on the theories of yin and yang, the 5 elements, wuxing, and meridians, channels of energy flowing through the body. The core healing methods in Eastern medicine include acupuncture, using fine needles to stimulate specific acupoints along the body's meridians to regulate the flow of qi, vital energy, balance yin and yang, and activate the body's natural healing processes. Herbal decoctions, combining various medicinal herbs in traditional formulations, boiled into a drink to treat symptoms and enhance overall vitality. Topical treatments and poultices, applying herbal salves, ointments, or fresh plant leaves externally to promote wound healing or relieve pain and inflammation. Moxibustion, burning mugwort, Artemisia, near acupoints to warm the body, stimulate circulation, and drive out cold or dampness from within. These methods were widely used to treat various ailments, including infectious diseases and epidemics, with the goal of restoring holistic health and boosting resilience. Ayurveda, the traditional medicine system of India, developed thousands of years ago, is grounded in a philosophy centered on the balance of the 3 doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. According to Ayurveda, health is the result of harmony between the body, mind, and the surrounding environment. The core treatments in Ayurveda include herbs and diet, using medicinal herbs, spices, and specially curated foods to balance the doshas and strengthen overall health. Massage and oil therapies, full-body massages combined with herbal oils to promote relaxation, detoxification, and improved blood circulation. Meditation and yoga, practices that help stabilize the mind, reduce stress, and boost the immune system. Detoxification, panchakarma, cleansing regimens aimed at removing toxins accumulated in the body and improving organ function. Ayurveda emphasizes a holistic approach to healing, helping the body heal itself and building natural resistance against diseases. Ancient Western medicine, dating back to Greek and Roman civilizations, was based on the theory of the 4 humours and the balance of opposing forces, akin to yin and yang. Renowned physicians like Hippocrates and Galen laid the foundation of medical science, leaving behind extensive texts on disease classification and treatment methods. Common treatments in ancient Western medicine included bloodletting, phlebotomy, drawing a certain amount of blood from the patient, believed to eliminate bad blood and restore balance among the bodily humours. Use of herbs, medicinal plants such as mugwort, chamomile, and honey were administered as drinks, ointments, or compresses. Primitive acupuncture or pressure stimulation. In some regions, methods to stimulate pressure points were used for therapeutic purposes. Detoxification. Methods such as herbal baths and teas were believed to flush out toxins and purify the system. Though many of these practices are now considered outdated or ineffective, during the medieval period, they were among the most widely used means to relieve pain, improve well-being, and prolong life. Bloodletting, in particular, became one of the most prevalent treatments of the Middle Ages. People believed that removing a portion of blood could expel bad elements from the body, helping to reduce illness symptoms and re-establish internal balance. In addition, techniques such as herbal poultices, incense burning, and medicated wines were commonly applied. Healers and physicians often used herbal salves and compresses to treat wounds or relieve pain in afflicted areas. Although these methods were not always effective in curing diseases, they reflect a traditional understanding of the human body and illness, knowledge built from generations of empirical experience. In the mid-14th century, Europe, along with many parts of the world, was devastated by one of the greatest catastrophes in human history, the Black Death. Known as a sweeping plague pandemic, the Black Death wiped out roughly 1/3 of Europe's population in just a few short years. Beyond the staggering death toll, the plague left profound and lasting impacts on nearly every aspect of economic, social, and cultural life. With such a massive loss of life, Europe's economy suffered an enormous shock. A severe labour shortage emerged as millions of working-age people perished, directly affecting agriculture, craftsmanship, and various other trades. Farms were abandoned, villages became desolate. This also meant that the value of labour skyrocketed, and surviving workers began to demand better conditions and wages. This shift pressured landowners and the nobility to adapt, marking a significant transformation in Europe's feudal social structure. The elite were now forced to negotiate with the labouring class, a pivotal moment in the continent's economic history. At the same time, disruptions in production and trade caused many industries to decline, markets to stagnate, and a prolonged economic crisis to unfold. However, in the long term, the labour reorganisation and social restructuring triggered by the Black Death helped pave the way for the emergence of market economies and industrial society in later centuries. Above all, the plague plunged society into widespread panic and deep disillusionment. Survivors, having witnessed death arrive swiftly and without explanation, began to question the authority of both religion and government. Fear and chaos led to social instability. Some regions descended into riots and disorder. Traditional social bonds weakened as depopulated villages and towns lost their communal structures and cohesion. Notably, the plague also fueled the rise of the working class and other emerging social groups, challenging the dominance of the nobility and aristocracy. As the old order faltered, common labourers gained more bargaining power and social recognition. Culturally, the Black Death left a deep imprint on the spiritual and artistic expressions of the era. Themes of death, the fleeting nature of life, and the fragility of human existence became widespread in art, literature, and philosophy. Paintings, sculptures, and poems often depicted skeletal figures, funeral imagery, and scenes of suffering, serving as constant reminders of mortality. Funerary rituals and prayer ceremonies became more solemn and elaborate, helping shape the distinct artistic and spiritual aesthetic of this historical period. In addition, pandemic inspired new philosophical perspectives and existential reflections, which later laid the intellectual groundwork for transformative movements like the Renaissance. In the absence of scientific understanding, the panic triggered a desperate search for scapegoats. The Jewish population, already marginalised and discriminated against, was falsely accused of poisoning wells to spread the disease, leading to horrific pogroms and mass killings. Not just the Jews, but minority groups, the poor, wanderers, and those with unfamiliar customs were often blamed and persecuted. So too were witches, individuals suspected of practicing dark magic, many of whom were hunted down and executed in the height of witch hunt hysteria. This explosion of superstition led people to rely on unscientific methods of healing, bizarre rituals, and ineffective yet costly practices. Not only were these measures wasteful and futile, but they also worsened the plague's devastation. Superstition deeply fractured society, fostering mistrust, fear, and disillusionment toward both secular and religious institutions. Pandemics, as tragic as they are, often appear as part of nature's cycles, a form of violent purification. Though they bring immense loss, they also lay the groundwork for transformation. Looking back, perhaps it was inevitable. Life continues, and we can never fully foresee what changes the future holds. While Europe was grappling with the Black Death in the 14th century, East Asia was by no means spared from outbreaks of plague and other infectious diseases. In China and Japan, feudal dynasties continually faced serious epidemics that threatened population stability and social order. Although lacking modern scientific understanding and medical technology, these societies relied on a combination of state governance, traditional medicine, and cultural practices to respond to and endure such crises. In this section, we'll explore how the feudal dynasties of China and Japan coped with plague outbreaks, including the roles of folk healers, traditional physicians, and the folk legends surrounding illness and healing. With its long imperial history, China had developed an elaborate administrative and medical system over centuries. During plague outbreaks, particularly under the Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, emperors and court officials implemented various measures to control disease spread. First is quarantine policies and regional lockdowns. The imperial court issued strict quarantine orders, locked down infected areas, and set up health checkpoints to regulate movement. Entire villages and towns could be sealed off to contain the outbreak, though enforcement varied by region. Second is public healthcare and medical infrastructure. The state maintained public hospitals and local clinics, training physicians in traditional Chinese medicine. Local officials often organised medical task forces to support treatment and help contain outbreaks. Third is sanitation campaigns and religious rituals. Authorities promoted hygiene, encouraged environmental cleanup, and sponsored rituals to ward off evil and pray for peace and healing, both for practical health and morale. And final, medical records and research medical texts recorded symptoms, treatment methods, and epidemiological patterns, helping to preserve experience and refine strategies for handling future outbreaks. During the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan endured multiple waves of plague and other infectious diseases. First, local medical administration. The Tokugawa government delegated responsibility to local lords and village heads, who were tasked with implementing quarantine measures, enforcing lockdowns, and overseeing disease surveillance. Community involvement was crucial for reporting and managing infections. Second, border control and restricted mobility. During outbreaks, checkpoints were established at borders, seaports, and major roads to monitor the movement of people and goods, aiming to prevent disease from entering safe zones. Third, traditional medicine and spiritual care. Kampo medicine, based on classical Chinese medicine, was widely used in combination with Buddhist rituals to care for the sick and bring psychological comfort to communities. In both China and Japan, folk doctors and traditional healers played crucial roles in treating and preventing illness, especially in rural areas and small communities. These healers used diagnostic techniques such as pulse reading, tongue inspection, and symptom analysis based on theories like yin-yang and the 5 elements in China, or similar frameworks in Japanese Kampo medicine. Treatments included herbal remedies, acupuncture, acupressure, moxibustion, burning mugwort to stimulate healing. Traditional formulas often relied on rare and potent herbs gathered from nature and combined according to ancient recipes meant to boost immunity and combat illness. Beyond physical treatment, folk healers conducted rituals, used amulets and talismans, and gave advice on hygiene, diet, and lifestyle, helping to prevent disease and build community resilience. They also acted as custodians of traditional medical knowledge, passing it down across generations and serving as a vital bridge between folk science and the general public. Plague and disease gave rise to rich folk traditions and myths in both China and Japan, reflecting how people made sense of the invisible dangers around them. Epidemics were often seen as divine punishment. Stories told of guardian deities or spirits who could both inflict and cure illness, depending on whether humans had angered or pleased them. Tales of vengeful ghosts or malevolent spirits causing illness were widespread, a symbolic way of expressing fear and helplessness in the face of uncontrollable events. Conversely, heroic figures emerged in folklore. Miracle-working physicians, monks, or shamans who could heal the sick and restore hope, inspiring collective belief in recovery. People relied on protective charms, cleansing rituals, and small community festivals to drive away evil and safeguard public health. While global history records devastating pandemics like the Black Death and bubonic plague, Many indigenous communities across the world endured smaller but equally challenging disease outbreaks. These communities, from Native Americans, Africans to tribal groups in Oceania and Asia, developed unique and diverse survival strategies to cope with illness. Without relying on modern medicine, they turned to natural knowledge, medicinal plants, traditional customs and communal spirit to safeguard health and sustain life. Living in close harmony with nature, Native American peoples developed a rich indigenous medical system, drawing on the abundance of herbs found in forests, mountains and plains. Native Americans followed strict rules on personal and environmental hygiene. For instance, they avoided large gatherings when illness was present and practiced spiritual and physical purification rituals. Indigenous healers, known as shamans or medicine men, Xhosa women, served not only as caregivers, but also as keepers of culture and oral tradition. Their methods included burning sacred herbs, spiritual ceremonies, and passing down healing knowledge through generations. They used various medicinal plants like wild thyme, angelica, and sacred fig leaves in remedies for drinking, poultices, or steam therapies. These herbs were believed to reduce inflammation, detoxify the body, and boost immunity. Native Americans also had a deep understanding of hygienic living, including selecting clean places for settlement, preparing food safely, and preserving it using smoking or drying techniques to prevent contamination. Across the African continent, communities developed rich and diverse traditional medical systems, often deeply tied to spiritual beliefs. In many tribes, the healer was also a spiritual guide or shaman, blending medicinal knowledge with rituals to ward off evil spirits, often believed to be the root cause of disease. Africans used herbal steam therapies, medicinal baths, and pastes made from tree sap or clay to protect the skin from insects and microbes. Social practices included avoiding direct contact with the sick and restricting movement during outbreaks, a natural community-based form of disease control. Plants like neem, moringa, and kava root were commonly used in decoctions, ointments, or herbal teas, not just to relieve symptoms, but also to strengthen the immune system, according to traditional beliefs. In Oceania, South America, and the highlands of Asia, tribal communities developed disease prevention strategies shaped by their local environment and cultural worldview. Many tribes chose to settle in elevated, clean areas, avoiding damp or polluted regions. They understood how to collect and manage waste, purify water sources, and keep their surroundings healthy. In addition to herbal medicine, these groups used physical healing techniques such as massage, acupressure, hot poultices, and herbal baths to support recovery. Collective rituals played a central role. They fostered unity, relieved anxiety, and strengthened the community's resolve to fight illness. Myths about protective spirits, nature gods, or ancestral powers also contributed to mental resilience and well-being. It's clear that through first-hand experience with outbreaks, people learned from adversity, gradually refining their practices over time. The healing methods developed by indigenous communities weren't just spontaneous responses. They were built on centuries of adaptation, observation, and cultural memory, offering valuable lessons for the future. Throughout human history, quarantine and disease control have been key strategies in preventing the spread of dangerous infectious diseases. Although today we understand the causes and mechanisms of bacterial and viral transmission, the idea of isolating people and controlling movement dates back long before the birth of modern medicine, shaped by centuries of experimentation, successes, and failures. The concept of quarantine can be traced back to 14th century Venice, during the devastating outbreak of the Black Death in Europe. As a bustling trade hub, Venice quickly recognized the risk of infection carried by ships and merchants arriving from affected regions. To protect its residents, the city implemented a mandatory quarantine policy, requiring all people and goods coming from plague zones to isolate for 40 days, a period known as quarantine, from the Italian quarantagiorni, meaning 40 days. This regulation was not only a public health measure but also deeply tied to religious and cultural beliefs, as the number 40 symbolized purification and preparation. Incoming individuals were required to wait on offshore quarantine islands, strictly monitored by health officials and guards. This was one of the first systematically organized quarantine models recorded in history. In addition to isolating individuals and goods, movement restrictions and lockdowns gradually evolved as part of disease control strategies. Lockdowns involved limiting or prohibiting people from entering or leaving infected areas to stop the spread of disease. In many countries, from Europe to Asia, governments imposed lockdowns on villages, towns, or even entire regions during outbreaks. Though these measures had significant social and economic impacts, they were considered necessary to protect public health. At the same time, quarantine checkpoints were established at entry points such as ports, border crossings, and major roads to monitor and control the movement of people and goods. These efforts required tight coordination between sectors such as health, security, and local authorities. Despite certain successes, quarantine and disease control measures throughout history faced many challenges and limitations. Before the discovery of bacteria and viruses, people lacked a scientific understanding of what caused disease. As a result, quarantine efforts were not always effective and sometimes led to a waste of resources. Many individuals resisted quarantine orders, trying to evade checkpoints and restrictions, which made enforcement difficult. This lack of cooperation was often driven by fear of losing freedom or livelihood. Prolonged lockdowns led to economic stagnation and serious disruptions to daily life, sometimes causing social unrest or even violent uprisings in extreme cases. Effective disease control required well-coordinated collaboration between different institutions, authorities, and the general population, something that many ancient societies struggled to achieve. Nonetheless, these early experiences provided valuable lessons that helped shape modern strategies for controlling infectious diseases. Through trial and error, humanity gradually learned how to better manage outbreaks, lessons that continue to inform our approach today and improve the effectiveness of our public health systems. Throughout the history of epidemic response, beyond medical and scientific measures, faith and religious rituals have played a crucial role in maintaining public health and societal morale. Though not always based on scientific evidence, these spiritual practices contributed to forming a multidimensional disease prevention system, blending the physical and the spiritual. Epidemics often bring about fear, anxiety, and social tension. In times when medicine was limited, faith acted as a psychological remedy, helping people remain steady in the face of invisible threats. Collective prayer ceremonies, pilgrimages, and religious processions were not only expressions of spiritual devotion, but also means of fostering community solidarity. People would come together toward a common goal, praying for health, peace, and divine intervention, thereby easing feelings of loneliness, fear, and despair. Community spirit was strengthened through these rituals, helping maintain social stability during outbreaks. This solidarity supported not only the sick, but also healthcare workers and caregivers, aiding them in overcoming hardship. Many traditional rituals were believed to promote healing both physically and mentally. For example, burning incense, lighting candles, and chanting prayers were thought to purify the air, ward off evil spirits, and create a positive atmosphere for health and recovery. These rituals often went hand in hand with hygienic practices such as bathing, changing into clean clothes, and keeping living spaces well ventilated. Though not scientifically explained at the time, these actions helped improve personal hygiene and environmental cleanliness, effectively aiding disease prevention. Moreover, participating in religious rituals gave both patients and the broader community a sense of being cared for, supported, and hopeful for recovery, factors that enhanced resilience and sped up the healing process. Today, many modern medical systems recognize the vital role of mental and emotional well-being in human health. Positive psychology, faith, and social support are now considered essential components that improve treatment outcomes and disease prevention. Numerous scientific studies have shown that patients who maintain an optimistic mindset and believe in recovery tend to experience better outcomes. Consequently, modern community health models now emphasize not only disease treatment, but also mental, cultural, and social support. Traditional rituals are now viewed as part of complementary medicine, integrated into public health programs to boost community participation and cohesion. During outbreaks, maintaining social order and securing public cooperation is critical to controlling the spread of disease. Faith and religious practices often reinforce ethical values, responsibility, and collective awareness. Through these rituals, communities are reminded of the importance of complying with health regulations, maintaining hygiene, and looking out for one another. This encourages unified action, reduces social conflict, and enhances the effectiveness of epidemic control. Faith also inspires volunteerism, supports the vulnerable, and cultivates compassion within society. As modern medicine continues to develop and expand, the integration of traditional and modern medical practices has become an important direction for enhancing the effectiveness of comprehensive healthcare. Traditional medicine, built upon the accumulated knowledge and experience passed down through generations, complements modern medicine, which is rooted in scientific research and advanced technology. The integration of these two systems not only leverages the strengths of both, but also contributes to creating a more holistic and multidimensional approach to treatment. Traditional medicine, including systems like traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, Ayurveda, folk medicine, and various indigenous healing practices, has existed for thousands of years. Herbal remedies, acupuncture, acupressure, massage, spiritual rituals, and mental wellness techniques have all brought significant health benefits to communities. These methods focus not only on symptom relief, but also on promoting balance between body and mind, emphasizing prevention and the enhancement of immunity. Traditional medicine offers several advantages, such as being naturally derived, having fewer side effects, being particularly effective for chronic conditions, and prioritizing individualized treatment. However, its major limitation lies in the lack of clear scientific evidence and rigorous verification systems, which leads to ongoing skepticism about the safety and effectiveness of some methods. In contrast, modern medicine is grounded in solid scientific foundations, with the ability to accurately diagnose and effectively treat acute and complex illnesses. Nevertheless, modern medicine often overlooks the spiritual and personalized dimensions of care. In many countries, especially across Asia, models that combine Eastern and Western medicine are being widely developed. Modern hospitals and clinics frequently house departments for traditional medicine, where patients receive a combination of conventional drugs and herbal remedies. This collaboration enhances treatment outcomes, reduces side effects, and improves patients' recovery and quality of life. For instance, in cancer treatment, patients may undergo chemotherapy or radiation therapy alongside herbal formulas that help boost overall health, reduce fatigue, and support the immune system. Currently, many scientific studies are focusing on analysing the chemical components, mechanisms of action, and effectiveness of traditional remedies. The application of molecular technology, molecular biology, and modern pharmacology is expanding our understanding and enabling the development of medical products based on traditional foundations. International collaboration in traditional medicine research is also increasing, helping to bring traditional treatments closer to modern scientific standards, while also preserving and promoting cultural heritage. A pandemic is not only a test of the body, but also a battle of the spirit and collective will. Throughout history, the strength of community spirit and perseverance has played a vital role in helping humanity overcome dangerous outbreaks. Solidarity, compassion, and resilience have served as the foundation preventing societies from collapsing and enabling them to move forward. During the Black Death, although panic and chaos were widespread, there were also many communities that demonstrated deep bonds and mutual support. People shared food, medicine, and cared for one another. Volunteer groups, religious institutions, and local communities stepped in to help the elderly, the sick, and those without family. Similarly, during the plague outbreaks in China and Japan, villages and indigenous groups often held collective rituals to strengthen morale and foster cooperation in disease prevention and control. Perseverance was not only reflected in enduring pain and loss, but also in the creativity to adapt and devise new solutions. During various epidemics, many communities developed new methods of isolation, hygiene practices, or improved caregiving techniques. For example, Venice pioneered the 40-day quarantine model, while other cultures developed herbal remedies and healing rituals that combined spiritual elements. The constant experimentation and refinement of approaches increased the community's chance of survival. Modern studies have shown that mental and social factors positively influence the effectiveness of epidemic response. Communities with high levels of unity, trust in authorities, and confidence in the healthcare system tend to comply better with prevention measures. On the other hand, when morale is damaged by fear, panic, or a lack of trust, disease control becomes much more difficult, often leading to resistance or evasion of public health rules. Community spirit and perseverance are among the most valuable lessons that history has left us. During the COVID-19 pandemic, these values were once again affirmed, as many nations and groups of people displayed extraordinary support, generosity, and determination in facing the crisis. Maintaining an optimistic spirit, social solidarity, and persistent adherence to public health measures will be key to helping us face future pandemics more effectively. Human history holds countless invaluable lessons on how to cope with epidemics, from catastrophic pandemics like the Black Death and bubonic plague to smaller outbreaks among indigenous communities. These experiences are not just painful memories, but also guiding lights that help us better understand disease and prepare more effectively for modern challenges. Through history, we have come to understand that pandemics are not divine punishment or the result of supernatural forces, but natural phenomena that can be studied and controlled. Past failures stemming from a lack of understanding about the causes of disease only amplified suffering, and from that, the advancement of medical science was born. Historical experiences have enabled modern scientists to identify bacteria, viruses, and modes of transmission through contact, air, food, and more, leading to the development of preventive measures such as quarantine, vaccination, personal hygiene, and environmental sanitation. Quarantine, isolation, and lockdown models developed centuries ago still serve as the foundation for today's public health strategies. Flexibly applying these historical lessons allows us to make better decisions and minimize losses in both lives and economic stability. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many countries implemented isolation and lockdown measures modelled on historical precedents, but enhanced with modern technology for more effective surveillance and disease management. History also shows that beyond medicine, community-based healthcare plays a vital role in disease control. Building public trust, clear communication, and active civic participation greatly increase the success of any prevention effort. Community spirit and perseverance, strengthened over centuries through rituals and belief systems, continue to be essential for maintaining social order and cooperation in modern public health campaigns. Thanks to historical lessons, modern medicine has developed powerful tools like rapid testing, contact tracing technology, vaccines, and new treatment methods. Understanding how previous diseases emerged, spread, and were eventually controlled helps science advance faster and more accurately. History also reminds us of the importance of preparedness, stockpiling resources, devising emergency response plans, and minimizing chaos when an outbreak occurs. It teaches us that pandemics are not just medical events, they're also psychological and social crises. Mental readiness, social support networks, and public education are critical elements in helping society overcome adversity. We must learn to stay calm, maintain hope, and place our trust in science, as well as in the power of collective spirit. For history has shown time and again that these are the keys to defeating any pandemic. End. And so, the journey of traditional and modern medicine comes to a close, not with the thunder of revolutions, but with gentle breaths weaving through time. Medicine is not just methods of healing, but a story of culture, community strength, perseverance, and the endless capacity to adapt and grow. Close your eyes and let the traces of the past, the lessons learned, the resilient souls, the ceaseless innovations, lull you into a peaceful sleep, and when you awaken, remember that health and life, no matter the era, always lie in the harmonious blend of science, tradition, and human spirit. Sleep well in dreams of a vibrant and diverse medical future, both ancient and modern, simple yet complex, but always profound and humane.